But we begin tonight with the job of the Secretary of Defense. Now, you would be forgiven if you've never given much thought to what exactly the job entails, so a little explanation is in order. The Secretary of Defense manages a staff of more than 3 million active duty, reserve, and civilian employees of the Department of Defense and controls a budget of around $900 billion. The Secretary of Defense oversees things like America's Nuclear Weapons Command and what forces are deployed where and when, as well as the staff and equipment at 500 military bases in the U.S. and some 750 American military installations abroad. In short, it's a big job, not just some figurehead ceremonial position. Just take a look at some of those who've recently served in the position. Current Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin commanded troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. President Barack Obama had Leon Panetta, whose resume included serving as CIA director, White House chief of staff, and a member of Congress, as well as Senator Chuck Hagel, the only Vietnam veteran and the first enlisted combat veteran to serve as secretary. Even Donald Trump had four-star General James Mattis, who also commanded troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. But with Trump returning to the office next week, we get this guy.
Yo, Independence Day is almost here. We're getting ready in the Hegseth household. We celebrate America, Old Glory, and the freedoms our forefathers fought to establish.
Yeah. That would be former Fox Weekend host and Army National Guard Major Pete Hegseth, who took the opportunity to introduce himself to the non-Fox viewing audience today and seemed to have some difficulty remembering all the people to thank.
Including our 7 wonderful kids, Gunnar, Jackson, Peter Boone, Kensington, Luke, Rex, sorry, it's a lot of them, and Gwendolyn.
It's a lot of kids to remember, you know. But he did make an effort to distinguish himself from the men, exclusively men, who previously served as Secretary of Defense.
It is true and has been acknowledged that I don't have a similar biography to defense secretaries of the last 30 years. But as President Trump also told me, we've repeatedly placed people atop the Pentagon with supposedly the right credentials, whether they are retired generals, academics, or defense contractor executives. And where has it gotten us? He believes, and I humbly agree, that it's time to give someone with dust on his boots the helm.
You know, boots on the ground. Unlike some of those decorated combat veterans I just named, like former Generals Austin and Mattis. But it was exactly Hegseth's lack of experience that drew questions almost exclusively from Democratic senators today, as Republicans mostly glossed over his previous roles.
Do you think that the way to raise the minimum standards of the people who serve us is to lower the standards for the Secretary of Defense? That we have someone who has never managed an organization more than 100 people is going to come in and manage this incredibly important organization?
Senator, I'm grateful to be hired by one of the most successful CEOs in American history, should I be confirmed.
You are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect. And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman.
Among the other fireworks today, there was the Democratic scrutiny of Hegseth's comments about women serving in combat, including comments he made last November that women straight up don't belong in combat, saying they've eroded standards, which he has since walked back. Today, the numerous women senators on the committee took aim at Hegseth's not so long ago denigration of women officers and his seeming change of heart.
Please give me an example. I get you're making these generalized statements.
Commanders meet quotas to have a certain number of female infantry officers or infantry enlisted, and that disparages those women.
Commanders do not have to meet quotas for the infantry. Commanders do not have to have a quota for women in the infantry. That does not exist. It does not exist.
What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days? Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion.
It was also exclusively Democrats who took on allegations of personal and professional misconduct by Hegseth during his tenure at Fox and as the head of 2 veterans nonprofits, including allegations of financial mismanagement at veterans groups and allegations he engaged in problem drinking, as laid out by Senator Mark Kelly.
On Memorial Day 2014, at a CVA event in Virginia, you needed to be carried out of the event for being intoxicated.
Senator, anonymous smears.
Just true or false? Very simple. Summer of 2014 in Cleveland, drunk in public with the CVA team.
Anonymous smears.
I'm just asking for true or false questions, true or false answers. An event in North Carolina, drunk in front of 3 young female staff members after you had instituted a no alcohol policy and then reversed it. True or false?
Anonymous smears.
Hegseth also responded to questions about his character, including an alleged sexual assault in October 2017. Charges were never filed, but Hegseth did pay his accuser an undisclosed sum in 2023 and had her sign an NDA. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine asked him to explain how those allegations reflect on his character.
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a child by another woman.
Again,
how do you explain your judgment?
Completely false charges against me.
You
fully investigated, and I was completely clear.
You have, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
Well, perhaps as concerning as Hegseth's refusal to answer whether or not an allegation of sexual assault is disqualifying to lead America's military. Senators will ostensibly have to rely on Hegseth's accounting or lack of accounting. An FBI background check did not interview the woman who accused him of assault in 2017 or either of his ex-wives, plural. Joining me now is a member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut. Senator, thank you so much for being here. This was an instructive day. I think Democrats elicited a lot of information that probably at least the Fox audience didn't know. A lot of us have read the reports on it. But how did it strike you that Republicans were mostly reading from op-eds supporting of Hegseth and declaring their support in advance? Just your take on that.
You know, my take on it, Joy, was that Republicans had the script because they are falling in line with the Trump cult. And as my colleague Tammy Duckworth said, he has a CEO. He's a friend of that CEO. He is unconventional as a chairman, Roger Wicker, a Republican, said, because he lacks qualifications that have led me, like Jack Reed, to say yes and vote for General Austin, General Mattis, others before him. But what struck me today is that, at most, this nominee is qualified to be a spokesperson for the Department of Defense. He's very glib and facile. He's excellent as a communicator. That's what he did as a talking head for Fox. But he is unqualified by virtue of his running 2 veterans organizations into the ground financially, the accusations of sexual impropriety and alcohol abuse. There's enough already on the record, but Republicans are choosing to look the other way simply because it's Donald Trump, and they are, frankly, fearful of the pressure and the threats and intimidation that he's directed at them.
It appears that includes Senator Joni Ernst, who is a combat veteran herself, who has talked about experiencing sexual assault or in the military herself, being a victim of it. She has indicated she's supporting him. Does that surprise you? Should it surprise us?
I have a lot of respect for Joni Ernst, and she's a friend, and I'm not presuming she will vote one way or the other.
She's indicated she will vote for him.
And I am still hopeful, but I'm very clear-eyed that Republicans are falling in line. And I am disappointed. I'm frankly disappointed in any Republican colleague who votes for this nominee. We showed today that he lacks the character and competence to command the most complex and difficult and important institution in this whole country, make life or death decisions. And there are no do-overs for some of these mistakes if they're made. We're talking about here war and peace, and the Secretary of Defense has to be more than a spokesman. He has to lead with the qualifications and preparedness that the American people expect and demand in justification to those men and women who risk their lives and raise their right hand and are willing to give their lives.
What should we make of the fact that it appears that the FBI investigation was incomplete, did not speak with his alleged accuser, sexual assault accuser? He, of course, denies it, but she was not interviewed, and that his ex-wives were not interviewed, despite the fact that these were not all anonymous. His own mother wrote a damning email to him that was published saying that he was an abuser of women. His mother, was she interviewed? I don't know. And also the fact that not all of you were given the ability to read even this sort of truncated FBI investigation. It's definitely reminding me of the Kavanaugh not-so-great investigation.
You know, I'm a former prosecutor, Joy, and I used to make arguments to the jury when a defendant hid something. Why is he hiding it? Why is he covering up? Because he has something to hide or cover up. That's what we should make of an inadequate and incomplete FBI report. Let me say something else. These are not anonymous smears. They are Fox employees who came forward and said, we saw him drunk at our office party.
The calls are coming from inside the house. These are all Republicans.
And we had to carry him out.
Yeah.
His mother, the accuser, they're not anonymous. They're willing to be, at least the accuser is, and one of his ex-spouses is willing to be interviewed. But the FBI looked the other way. What we can make of that inadequate and, frankly, failed FBI report is that they failed to do the job. And we were denied access even to that FBI report, which I think is not only a breach of our tradition, but it is also a whitewash. They're stonewalling and slow walking.